This is mostly towards the table, Professor Acharya and Professor Mahmood. Oh, wow. Hello. But please, the other table, Chip and Dave. I heard a lot from your talk, Professor Mahmood, kind of discussing Professor Acharya's talk. You mentioned kind of what are we getting paid for clicking likes or for carrying our cell phone. And Dr. Acharya mentioned that our personal data is being pirated by governments and industry. But I guess what I'd like to challenge you on and hear your response is, doesn't that kind of presume that there is some sort of monetary value that I should be compensated for your use of my personal data? And if my personal data has some sort of monetary value to me, doesn't that make it more of a property right? So my challenge is the EU concept of a privacy right as a fundamental right, whereas that characterization, I think I heard a little bit over here, is that it's more of a property right. How are we supposed to see our data privacy, and how should we look at it?
That's a wonderful question, and I don't think there is an easy sort of answer to it. I'm not as interested, even though it's a very legitimate issue, the privacy question versus characterization as a property right question. And my concern more is, and that goes to the root of sort of the age of capital, is enclosures and appropriation. As you know from your history, that the very origins of sort of capital is the enclosure movement in Britain, for example, where land belonged to everybody, and then it had to be picketed to raise the sheep, to send the wool to the Americas and all that. And so the history of capital has been appropriation of the commons. So now that is a terminology which has dropped out of even social theory, much less common sense and common discourse over time, and has no room certainly a neoliberal era. So that's why the issue becomes either privacy or private property. The notion of the commons, meaning those resources which everybody owns. So it's neither somebody's privacy nor somebody's property, as land was at one time, as high seas are to some extent, as the cyberspace is.
But Doctor, let me push back a little bit.
Sure.
If it's a commons, then it's still a resource. But the EU Charter characterizes it not as a resource, but as a fundamental innate right that each of us as individuals have, much like a civil or human right.
I have no difficulty with that. If the choice is that, I would rather go the privacy route. My little bit concern with simply the privacy right is that I can voluntarily give it up. So that will solve only part of the problem. Now they just rip us off without paying us anything, then they will get my genetics and pay me $2. That remains for me still a troubling thing, because it goes back to very foundational issues. The problem of our time at the end of the day is that unfortunately we can conceive the end of the world. Due to the environmental crisis, due to the nuclear thing, anybody can conceive the end of the world. But we cannot conceive the end of rule of capital. And that is, I think, the colonization of imagination is so complete, as it were, which to me is the most case, that we can't even think outside of the box now. And then duke it out and evaluate whether this would be. So the choices are presented in a way that the fix is already in. And they become kind of hard choices. So I'll kind of leave it there. So your question, extremely important and legitimate. If the choices were that, I would rather go the privacy route. But to think that privacy route solves the question, there are a lot of privacy laws already in place, and to what extent they in practice are conformed to is a separate question. It even brings into the debate around formal rights versus substantive rights. So, putting things on paper sounds wonderful, and we can have a cocktail party about it. But is that really solves the sort of global issues? I think we need to think some more and think outside of the box. Thanks.
So I will just do a quick, a very different approach than Professor Mohammed, is that, data can have two firms. One is commodity firm, another is non-commodity firm. It's a matter of regulation, how the government wants to regulate what kind of data can be commodity and cannot be commodity. Like HIPAA, your all medical information is not commodity. That protects your data, privacy, your personal, all this personal data. So how do we access that? When we are using the internet and everything, and you click everything, and all of a sudden you are doing kayak one thing, and next day you open the computer, and there are 3, advertisement on other cheap tickets, offers, prices there. You just get that unwanted, undesired. You have already bought the ticket now. So the commodification of data. Who is controlling that? Who is regulating that? What is the role of government? What is the role of lawyer now here? So commodifying data, what kind of data can be commodified? What kind of data cannot be commodified? If it is commodified and it is being sold and it is a property right, yes it is. If it is not, it's not property right. The law is going to establish the definition, whether it is. And the human rights aspect, we can discuss human rights aspects. If it is a property right, or otherwise your data, non-commodity data, non-commodified data, if it is violated your right to privacy, from property right or non-property right, doesn't matter. Right to reparation is a big human rights aspect. And if your privacy is gone, you have to have some sort of approach, the litigational approach or claim aspect, right to reparation for whatever it takes that your data have been used and other people are making money out.
Thanks. It's a very legal. I want to be sensitive to our prescribed schedule. I think there's a break scheduled right now till 3:30, and the next panel starts, and the next presenter is at 3:30. Is that correct? So I think we should break now, but I think people will be available individually, perhaps, for individual questions if you'd like to talk to people during the break or later this afternoon. So thank you all for participating.